Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Royal Blue podcast. I'm your host of sorts today, Echo Everton reporter Chris Beesley, joined by my colleague Paul Wheelock, who is actually just at the other side of the office. But such is the way we're doing this today, we have to be in separate rooms. But looking forward to talking to you about what's been a hugely momentous week already at Goodison Park, and then looking forward to this weekend's fixture against Crystal Palace. I mean, to start off, Paul, I mean, how are you?
Yeah, good. A lot better from having the takeover news on Monday. I know it's not completed yet, is it? But I think it's definitely lifted a cloud over us as a sports base and obviously over the club, because it's been such a long-running saga. And I know we'll probably talk about it in more detail. But for me personally, I felt like we could never really go forward as a club until it was sorted. And, it feels like this one could really happen after a lot of false dawns, doesn't it?
Yeah, so as you say there, Paul, I mean, the Friedkin group actually one of 5 prospective owners who's been talking to Farhad Moshiri over the past 2 years. They were in pole position there in the summer, a period of exclusivity, and then pulled out just hours before the first pre-season friendly at Sligo Rovers. So obviously there's been big changes since then. I mean, when things actually came about on Monday, things moved very quick, didn't they?
Yeah, like shockingly quick, wasn't it? Really, I think, I think Dave Powell, our colleague, business football writer, had reported recently that they were still on the periphery, weren't they, the Friedkin group, and they'd never probably really gone away, given the fact that they were one of the club's lenders with that £200 million loan. But it did feel like the music that it was going to be John Textor if he could get over that huge obstacle of selling his Crystal Palace's shares. And clearly he was very keen, and clearly he talks a very good game. But it was always in the back of your mind that, well, he's still got to get rid of his Crystal Palace shares before he could go through with what he wanted to do with Everton. So while it wasn't a complete, it still came out of nowhere, but I think we always realised the Friedkin group may never have gone away. But obviously there was the issue regarding the 777 ACAP situation. But yeah, on Monday, for one, it was the biggest shock was how quickly it was then announced, wasn't it? Because as we both know, working in journalism, kind of stories come and then they take a few days then to materialise. But it was done within hours, and that's really promising, I think, because it kind of suggests that the actual takeover itself could go through, quickly as well, which we need it to, don't we? Ideally before the turn of the year.
Yeah, I mean, see, as you mentioned, Paul, the issues with 777 were the stumbling block mentioned during the summer when that one ended. But given that they would have had the chance to look through all the books back then, seeing everything else about the club, like you say, they've already ploughed in that 200 million already. There was a certain amount of commitment anyway. And as you say, in terms of getting the deal done, that was the problem with 777 in the best part of last season, 8.5 months. They were chasing that green light from regulatory approval. But you wouldn't imagine that would be an issue with the Friedkin group. He's on a number of European boards. I think last time I checked, he's about 270th on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index in terms of the world's richest people. They got an estimated fortune just shy of $10 billion. Those aren't likely to be hurdles. So, I mean, without putting you on the spot, like you said, you would hope it would be sorted sooner rather than later, given that the background that the Friedkin group possesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, the Premier League have got a duty. I know they've obviously got a duty to make sure everything is correct and above board. And, let's face it, the Premier League haven't been Everton's best friends in recent times. But I suppose they did the club and us as a supporter base a favour by not rushing through a 777 deal, because, as has become clear since they were first given the green light to buy Everton from Farhad Moshiri, it's been like an unmitigated disaster, hasn't it, really? And you can see what's happened to other clubs. So in that respect, the Premier League did their job by not pushing that one through. But yeah, again, the proof will be in the pudding, won't it, of Dan Friedkin and his Friedkin group. But everything suggests that this is something that needs to be done, and the Premier League have got a duty to the club and the fan base, really, because Everton have been in kind of state of limbo for so long now, haven't we, really? You know, with Farhad Moshiri clearly not wanting to be the club's owner anymore, not being able to be the club's owner anymore. So the wealth is clearly there. His track record in football. I know they're going through a tough time with Roma at the moment, given the sacking of, you know, a very, very popular former player and their manager, Daniel De Rossi. But he's led them to the club. The club in recent years has led them to a first European trophy. And I think, as you say, his background in sports and his background in business, like, again, the proof will be in the pudding. He'll use that phrase again. But in terms of new owners, I struggle to see how we could have potentially got a better one at the moment, given his background and given his wealth. So, yeah, you hope the Premier League will help the club along and try and get this done within 7 or 8 weeks.
Yeah, like you say, Paul. I mean, as much as you see, quite justifiably, both Everton, the people who run the club and the supporters have got those many grievances with the Premier League. But as you say, that in terms of doing the due diligence last season and that Premier League board not letting 777 in, I mean, use the phrase about dodging a bullet. I think more or less everyone is of that line of thinking now in terms of what's unravelled with 777. But in contrast, Friedkin's a very different character, as you say. Like he continues that trend of American owners. I think about half of the Premier League does have that now. And again, it's the multi-club model, albeit only just the one other club with Roma, probably with a similar stature. With Everton, I mean, as billionaires go, as American owners go, I mean, do you like what you've heard and seen about Friedkin? Obviously, you've mentioned there that, you know, there's been a bit of a spot of bother of late this last week. Ironically, the week going into the Everton deal, in terms of, like you say, he placed De Rossi as coach, and then the CEO walked out on the eve of a game where there were the protests. But as the overall picture, are you encouraged what you've seen from his time at Roma?
Yeah, I think so. What I've read and listened to about, I don't think it's been, you know, completely plain sailing at Roma, and I think there's been some decisions that the fans have questioned, not just the De Rossi one at the moment, but I think that would happen. That happens at a lot of football clubs, and really, I think it would be. I know this, it's because the deal's not done yet, but hopefully Farhad Moshiri's ultimate Everton legacy will be selling it to fit and proper owners who take the club forward, and then obviously getting the stadium over the line. But without being too harsh, it would be difficult to have an owner that goes through the kind of disasters that Moshiri's gone through. So I don't think the bar is set that high for the Friedkins. I think that's an advantage for them, you know, coming in. Clearly, if they are able to spend money on the squad, that will win the fan base over, because Everton haven't been able to do that for 2-3 years now. If they hire an established and competent and ambitious board, I think that will tick so many boxes as well. And I think they've done that with the Roma CEO. I think she's very, very well regarded. Unfortunately, she's just left the position, hasn't she, following the protests since De Rossi's sacking. But no, I whereas 777, the red flags were everywhere, weren't they, really? And even with Textor, not in terms of what he said about the club, you know, because I think there were certain things. I don't think the club were too happy with what they said about Sean Dyche, and I can understand that, because I'm not sure he should have done that, really, given the fact that he was not even a prospective owner at that time. But there were certain red flags with Textor, and Friedkin, they're not perfect. I don't think they are, but I think there's enough good there. And you can tell, can't you, Chris, by the reaction of the fan base, and you'll know better than me. It feels like when the deal collapsed in the summer, there was real disappointment within the club as well. So yeah. I imagine this one is, you know, from the people who've worked really hard within the club to keep it going through what has been a really troubled spell. I hope for their sake as well. If it felt like that in the summer, that there's pleasure and delight now that it seems to be going through.
Yeah, and in terms of the way he conducts business, as you said there, John Textor, a very colourful character. Another one, obviously, got a multitude of clubs there: Olympique Lyonnais in France, Molenbeek, Belgium, and Botafogo in Brazil. I think there's been issues in Brazil there when he was hauled up in front of the authorities. He was claiming that things were rigged there, and he had to answer for that. He's certainly not backwards and coming forwards when it comes to his opinions. And on the one hand, I think a few Blues when he was first linked with Everton, saying, "Oh yeah, we want someone to stand up for Everton." But yeah, he's certainly not shy of saying things, and you just wonder how much of that was potentially sort of taught in a good game. Of course, I mean, he tried to sweet talk Everton into saying it was like the opportunity to become president of the United States and go to the White House. So yeah, lots of flannel, as it were, and the bouquets when it came to rent a quote. But in contrast, Mr. Friedkin seems to have go about things in a rather more sort of formal manner, and so you don't tend to hear as much for him. And I just wonder, is that probably showing that he's just a quiet efficiency, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right, mate. I think with text, I think it would have been great for the media, wouldn't he? Because he was never scared of saying something provocative, really. And I think, given what the club has gone through over the last years, we've definitely, without question, been hard done by the Premier League and the independence commissions compared to, say, what's happened with Nottingham Forest and the way that Leicester, fair play to them, wriggled their way out of a potential points deduction for this season. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having a leader who would be able to put the head above the parapet and really fight for Everton. And I think Textor would have given us that. But I think what you kind of alluded to there, Chris, we've had enough, to copy a Sean Dyche phrase, we've had enough noise around this club, haven't we, for a number of years now. And I know you guys have all been writing about Friedkin this week. And what's become clear is that it's actually quite impressive the way that he's gone about this, hasn't he? He's never really shouted from the rooftops about it, but clearly it's been something that's been going along on the back burner, and clearly he wants this, because he got close enough in the summer, didn't he? And then he decided to walk away, and it appears that they've been able to do a way of moving forward with the issues around the 777 and ACAP, and I like that. I think what as Evertonians people want now is just strong focus, ambitious leadership. We do desire communication. It is important, but if they can go about their business silently and give the supporters and give the team at Finch Farm and at Goodison Park and eventually the new stadium what they want, which they've not been able to have in recent years, I'm not too fussed if I hear from him or even see him all the time, because I think, as you touched on earlier now, Chris, he'd be one of probably 9 or 10 American owners, and I don't think that's the way it works anymore, really. You only have to look at across the park at Liverpool with FSG. I think, even though we say it through gritted teeth, that it's been a very successful ownership for FSG at Anfield, and they're not there too often, are they? And they don't speak too often. They've had to speak out a few times after missteps they've made, but that's not for me. I think if we just need the club being ran right, and hopefully Friedkin will be able to do that.
Yeah, and you say about that, the actual running of the club, because obviously what it would mean, obviously the Friedkin coming in, the Friedkin group would obviously mean the end for Farhad Moshiri. It's something he's been trying for a couple of years now, and you and I both are aware of those quotes from Simon Jordan this week when he compared dealing with Moshiri like trying to nail a jelly to the wall. It's been chaotic, hasn't it? I think obviously he came in with huge ambitions, the stadium being the one tangible thing that he has produced, but unfortunately in so many other aspects of the club, namely on the field, it just hasn't worked for him, and that's probably an understatement.
Yeah, without question, mate. I think you're right. I think he was well intentioned, wasn't he? And he certainly tried to put his money where his mouth is at the start, but he clearly didn't have at that stage that window of opportunity that he talks about, didn't he, himself? Like, we clearly didn't have the infrastructure in place, or if we had the infrastructure in place, it was too muddled, because it's well documented. It felt around those times we had 3 or 4 different people signing players, and that's not the way it should have been. Eventually tried to remedy that with Marcel Brands, but as you've spoken about recently yourself on one of our Royal Blue podcasts, he didn't appoint the managers, did he? Or allegedly didn't appoint the managers with Marco Silva. So, I think that the intentions were always good with him, certainly at the start. But he just didn't run the club correctly. He hasn't run the club correctly because at the end of the day, his legacy, what we talked about earlier, is hopefully the stadium. It's hopefully a good pass on to the Friedkins as better owners. But for this club to be deducted 2 separate points deductions last season was, it's a real low ebb, wasn't it? A real low point in the club's history, and his name's been above the door. And we can blame managers who have certainly not been blameless. We can blame the board who have certainly not been blameless, and we can blame the players who have certainly not been blameless. But for me, it's on his head. And while there's still a little bit work to do, I don't think I'll be sad to see the back of him, but I will be grateful if the Friedkins do prove to be the best owners, best custodians of this club. And really, we'll definitely be grateful about what's been one of the only few positives these few recent years, and that's the stadium, isn't it?
Yeah. I think as Michael Ball said, didn't he? I mean, all for that to get 2 separate points deductions for financial breaches under a billionaire accountant, unfortunately, says it all. I'm sort of moving on now in terms of, first of all, before we actually get to the football itself, see what Sean Dyche was asked about the takeover, because obviously, like all managers, it will have significant ramifications for him. It was interesting, some of the quotes he was saying. Joe Thomas had the piece, the embargoed piece, I think 10:30 last night, when he said that, I've not got the quote here verbatim, but to go do all this stuff and sort of keep their heads above water, and then when it came to the time to move to the new stadium, off your pop now. He still, he says he has ambitions to be there and to lead them into that new stadium. I mean, I guess a lot of that will be what happens between now and next May in terms of the team, and that's something that obviously we'll be coming forward to shortly. But I mean, what did you think of what Sean Dyche was saying in the immediate aftermath to the takeover?
Well, I'm glad he said it, because I think Sean Dyche, he doesn't give too much away, does he, in press conferences? You'll know better than me, Chris. Mm-hmm. But it was a really good line, and I'm glad he said it, because I think it's fair to say his popularity within the supporters is not as high as it has been probably at the end of the season, given the start to the season that the team has made. Yeah. But I can understand where he comes from. He's had an unenviable job. There's no question about that. He came in at the back end of a season the second half of the season where the club, the off the field problems were so huge at that point. We were talking in the office, weren't we, earlier today about that infamous Southampton game and everything that went with that. He came in shortly after that period and kept the club up, did his job. And last season, you'll forever have my respect, because even though it's easy to say now that the 3 teams at the bottom were poor, and they were, and you can see that by their final points tallies, to guide Everton to 16 points, was it? We were clear of safety by the end of it. After
it would have been level with Brighton in 11th, wouldn't it?
Yeah, which is incredible. And 2 separate points deductions, chaos off the field, more good players leaving. He without question, deserves credit for that. As you rightly said then, now, if he is going to be the manager to lead Everton into the new stadium and under this new hopeful ownership, he's got to get the results, hasn't he? And that's again, everything he says is right. I'm sure there's a lot that we don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. We may not know the half of it, and he's had to work with one hand tied behind his back. But his job as a football manager is certainly as a club with the stature of Everton is to win games. And if he wants to be the manager in the new stadium, got to keep on track, hasn't he? He's got to keep us up, trying if we continue progress that we showed last season in terms of points. And then if he does that, surely he'll give himself a good chance. But as he also admitted in the press conference yesterday, we don't know, do we? We just don't know with the Friedkins. We don't know what their vision for the football club's going to be. So I'm sure for him, there's a bit of uncertainty, but he probably also says he's had that uncertainty throughout his couple of seasons now. It's par for the course for him.
Yeah, what I would say is I think it's actually a massive opportunity for him. A lot of new owners come in and have got their new ideas, and if they have that, if they're hell bent that to make a change, they will do. But obviously, make that tough for them. Make it a call to be made in terms of. I think one of the problems was, I know Dyche won't like this comparison because it's one that, although he always says don't fight the box you put in, he doesn't like it when people say this. In terms of Sam Allardyce actually had a huge opportunity at Everton, and to be fair, he finished 8th. They were out of that relegation battle by the end. They were in the top half of the table by the first week in charge. But playing and that was in December, and playing attritional football and all those stats at the time, lowest shots, whatever. I mean, they were all famous at the time in terms of Everton being bottom or next to the bottom. But so he ended up finishing 8th. And I think that was a huge opportunity for Sam Allardyce at Everton at the time, and obviously he didn't take that in terms of the football he played. Obviously, the results are going to be a big part of this, but what will also play a part is the style of football. I would argue, and I've been a huge supporter of Sean Dyche and said that, that making a change now after 8 managers in 8 years would be another backward step. But in terms of for him personally, I would argue he's never going to manage a club as big as Everton. And again, after this. So this is a real sort of pivotal opportunity for him in his career. He was at Burnley for almost a decade. He could actually be onto something really good here after, as much as he's had a really trying time this last couple of years. The new stadium, almost 53,000 capacity, the historic moment here. I mean, if he's got anything about it, he should be thinking, yeah, like he said, that he really should be wanting to have this opportunity to work for Everton at the new stadium.
Absolutely, mate. Couldn't agree more, really. I think, and I think his demeanour changed slightly yesterday, and understandably, because, I'm pretty sure he will be happy that there's, while I say there might be uncertainty over what the new owners want, but I think he'll be happy to go away from questions about ownership, really, if this sails through, as we all hope. And I hope he is positive, because I think I'm like you, Chris. I think I've said it to you, privately as a friend in the office. I said that the one time I questioned Dyche was after 6-0 at Chelsea, and I remember that you stuck by him, and then you were proven absolutely correct. And there's been a couple of times this season, obviously the results haven't been great where my supporting him has wavered, but it was probably more than some of the things he said earlier this season. I think at one point because it's hard, and I think sometimes he's got to kind of play down expectations a little bit. But there was one time where he was talking about Goodison Park, and he was saying just because it's the final season at Goodison Park doesn't mean we're naturally going to be higher than we were in the table last season. And I do understand that, but I think this, as you were saying there, this is actually, now that a takeover seems to be going through, this is actually quite an exciting time, isn't it? Because it maybe finally we can enjoy the fact that it's been the final season at Goodison Park, because I'm still not there yet. When I'm going to
anyone who's given the results,
giving the results, and that's terrible, isn't it? That's not what you want. We certainly don't want to be going to that last Southampton game with our survival in our hands. That would be absolutely dreadful, and I don't think the nerves could take it again after what we've gone through. But I hope it's lifted some weight off his shoulders, and I hope we can play. And to be fair to him, I hope we can play like we did for the 60 minutes of last time. I hope we can play for the 87 minutes that we did against Bournemouth, because it is all about results, and he says that himself. But I actually think he's got players in that squad now, in Jai and McNeil and Lindstrom and Calvert-Lewin, the way he's playing, to actually go and have a go at teams, certainly the teams in and around us in the table. And I think first and foremost, he's got to get the results. And if he gets those, and he can do it with a bit of style, and I think we've seen it, in between the collapses in recent games, we've seen it. I think it's a huge opportunity for him, because I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if he'd ever get a bigger club than Everton in his career, but this is like a huge job, isn't it? Because if we're a Premier League club next season with our PSR issues improved, which they seem to be, and owners who could be willing, within reason, to boost the squad, and going into the new stadium as the first Everton manager, it's a huge carrot, isn't it? So, but as you say rightly, this is a great chance for him now. And if by the time the Friedkins come in place, hopefully by say January time, if he's got Everton higher up the table and away from danger, or safe by March, he'll have given himself a great chance, I imagine.
Yeah, and that all starts with Saturday, of course. It took Everton 6 Premier League games, to be fair, to win last season. Unfortunately, they go into Game 6 again, looking for their first win against a Crystal Palace side who, despite making a change last season and having big improvements, have also had a tough start to the season.
Yeah, I think they've got a few injuries, haven't they? Obviously lost a brilliant player who's taken Germany by storm in Elise. It's difficult, isn't it? Everton have been in the same position. If you each season you lose your best players, it can take its toll. But they've got a lot of talent in that squad still, Crystal Palace, and it will be a hard game. But yeah, what was it? Was it Bournemouth last year? Who did we beat first time last year?
It was Bournemouth, wasn't it? Sorry, Brentford away first, wasn't it?
Brentford away, and then the Bournemouth one.
Yeah.
Bournemouth after that, and as it's been a positive week, I'm going to be positive, and I do think there's been signs, to go 2 up at Villa. I think that collapse was more understandable given how well Villa are playing and given their squad. That could happen at a place like Goodison Park, which is riding a bit of a crest of a wave at the moment. But let's try and be positive and say, if you can get close to replicating the levels that we've shown at home to Bournemouth and that first hour against Leicester, there's a chance to do what we did last season and get that first win at the 6th time of asking.
Yeah, I mean, Dyche himself has actually spoke well about the players in terms of last season, that the fact that he didn't go under when they had those 2 points deductions and their mental resilience there. I mean, how much do you think it will actually play a part, the Friedkin deal being announced this week? It's almost like a weight off everyone's shoulders, you would hope.
Yeah, I certainly supporters-wise, I think we both agree with that, wouldn't we? And I'd hope that is, if not certainty over Dyche's future, just a bit more certainty over the club now that something's really happening. So hopefully it helps him and the players. Oh, I don't know. We've been in this. I say I've been a club reporter myself. I cover Blackburn, and believe you me, that could be like a circus at times there. And I do think the players are affected by it in some way, even though they're incredibly well numerated and they do live in a bubble to a certain extent. I'm sure in some way it's got to be a lift, just on some level, because they will watch Sky Sports News, they'll read the Echo, they'll be on social media, they'll know exactly what's going on. So and to be fair to them, I don't think it's certainly Dyche's time in charge. I'm not sure. Maybe after the points deductions, I think after the second lot, I think it may have hit the players, mightn't it? In that 13-game winless run, because it must have been really hard for them, knowing they should be on they were a lot higher up the table. But I think by and large the players over Sean Dyche's tenure have dealt with everything that's gone well. And if it does help them, knowing that there's a change coming at the top and it could be a brighter future, brilliant. But they've just got to concentrate on the performance, and I think there's been enough in the last few games to suggest that they could be okay.
Yeah. And then last Sunday, Jarrad Branthwaite, who hasn't kicked a ball for the first team all season, hasn't played since the trip to Arsenal, last game of last season. He came through 90 minutes at Hague Avenue, as I still call it, up there at Southport. Joe Thomas, my colleague, our colleague, he was over there. Bit of a home game for him. Saw Jarrad play the full 90 minutes. Would you play him tomorrow against Crystal Palace?
Oh, big question, isn't it? Big question. If he's ready, and obviously now they'll have all the data on him, won't he, from the sports science department. If they think there's no issue with him breaking down, I'd be half tempted. And I'd feel a little bit for Michael Keane, because I actually thought he's been at times. I think he's a bit of an unlucky charm at times as well, because I think he seems to come into the team when it's struggling and goals are going away, and then obviously he can become a bit of an obvious scapegoat. But I don't think he's been one of Everton's worst performers this season. The last game I seen in the flesh was Southampton in the Cup, and while it was a really poor performance, I thought Michael was one of Everton's better players that evening. Obviously stepped up to score the first penalty as well. So I think it'd be slightly harsh on him, but with the greatest respect in the world, we've seen the difference that not having Jarrad Branthwaite available has made to the team. The amount of goals Everton conceded this season compared to how we ended last season is stark, isn't it? So probably to answer your question, if there's no concerns over him having any kind of issues, I think I would, because he proved last season that he's one of the top centre-backs in the league, and we need him back. We need him back alongside Tarkowski, and hopefully Mykolenko's been okay this week, hasn't he? I think he's recovered. We need Mykolenko back to his best, because it was what a lot of last season's kind of success was built on, wasn't it? Like having a solid defence. I think it was only Arsenal had more clean sheets. So yeah, I think it'd be a huge boost. Would you go for him yourself if he's fit?
I'd put him. I mean, Get the Carlisle Kaiser back in. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like waving a magic wand, but yeah, I just think that the way is not just what he brings to the table himself in terms of his physical presence and composure on the ball, but hopefully it will give that boost that they require and that extra spring in their step. I was just finally, before we go on to predictions, I was going to ask you about, obviously, midfield's the other area where there's quite a lot sort of to choose from now in terms of it was Orel Mangala paired with Abdoulaye Doucouré for the first time at Leicester City with that new combination. Idrissa Gueye back, I understand, from his compassionate leave, and obviously Timo Robenham did well in some of those early matches as well. So it's actually quite a lot of competition for places in those areas. And of course, James Garner, who played right back last time out. I mean, if he comes back into the fray to go in his natural position, so there's quite a few options there for Dyche.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Garner, I thought it was a tough afternoon for him, not in terms of the way he played, but the Leicester goal scorer, Maldini, he's a good player. He's a handful,
yeah.
He was a handful. He was a handful, but I thought Garner stuck to the task manfully, and I think it later transpired he'd been feeling, one of the players had been feeling ill as well.
Yeah.
And I think it could be a way in for him in the team at the moment. Where obviously Seamus is not there. Ashley Young may be needed on the left side. Nathan Patterson, from what Sean Dyche was saying yesterday, is clearly not ready for first team football yet. So that it could almost solve the headache for Dyche there, getting a good player into the team. And I think at home, with the onus is on us, I think that could be a way to go. Midfield, yeah, you're absolutely right. 4 doesn't go into 2. I think Irabuna was probably a bit unlucky to lose his place in the side because he was probably one of the better players in the first 2 or 3 games of the season. But for me personally, the balance wasn't quite right. And I think for 60 minutes, Mangala and Doucouré as the deeper players behind that kind of attacking front 3, front 4, it worked quite well. And I know after the game, there's a lot of scrutiny on Sean Dyche's subs at the moment. And maybe, again, it's easy to say, isn't it, with hindsight, maybe pushing Doucouré further up the field wasn't the best move, maybe. And I know you spoke to him, didn't you, after that game? You had a brilliant interview with him. He covered so many topics where he spoke so well, and he said, didn't he? He's played that position before, and you will obviously know better because you spoke to him face to face. But he seemed to be okay with that if that's where he's going to take a step back.
Yeah, he also said he enjoyed playing in those conditions. So far too polite, or perhaps he was still in shock. I don't know. Finally then. So yeah, predictions time to finish off. How do you see it going?
Well, it's been quite a positive podcast, this, hasn't it? You know, with the takeover this week and Branthwaite coming back, and I think I think the fact that you said it took us 6 games last season. I'm going to say it's going to repeat the trick, and I'm going to say 2-0 to Everton.
Okay. Not be quite as confident as Paul, but almost. I'm going to go for a classic 1-0 Sean Dyche scoreline, and like you say, Everton to get Jarrad Branthwaite back in there and bring a first clean sheet, a welcome clean sheet, and first win of the season. Let's hope so. So yeah, I'll say 1-0 Everton. So yeah, don't forget you'll have Joe Thomas's verdict, my player ratings and analysis, Sean Dyche quotes, a lot, video reactions from both Joe and myself coming up next week, and obviously we will review the whole lot in the Royal Blue podcast then. So I've been your host, Chris Beesley, been joined by Paul Wheelock. This has been the Royal Blue podcast.